we're making these goods that we're trying to sell. It's based on our faith, but it has to be at a certain level, a certain bar for people to even listen and to buy it, to buy into it. So I think the pressure that we've felt over the years is usually if something's not connecting or not working. But honestly, it's not like we really, our focus isn't like, oh, we have to be on the radio, we have to have successful songs. That's not our focus, though. I can definitely say that. So at this point in our lives, it's like, I think we just count it all like a blessing that we even get to do it, and we get to like interact with people in general, whether it's a concert or just doing stuff like this. So I try not to feel the pressure, but it's usually, if I start to feel the pressure in any way, it's because I'm thinking about the wrong things, I guess.
Hey man, you want to talk about God? So Chris, thanks for being here, man. Appreciate you being on Kingdom Empowered. And you are the guitarist, if I'm not mistaken, for Sanctus Real, correct?
That's the main thing. That's the main gig. You're correct.
Right. You also write songs. You do all kinds of stuff, right?
Yeah, yeah. There's the fun part of being in a band, and there's like the business part of being in a band, and I get to do it all. So it's all in your perspective too, because sometimes the stuff that you wouldn't think is fun is actually pretty fun as well. So yeah,
What's
a little bit of everything.
what's an example of that? Like, what's something that I wouldn't think is fun being?
I thought you'd never ask. I thought you'd never ask. Well, it turns out, I didn't know this when I got into this whole thing. It turns out that I love accounting. I mean, it's kind of bizarre. So there's something I love about being in the band and the position I have in it, at least for the past 8 years about. I've become the band's accountant slash business manager. So like a balanced checkbook for me is just as awesome as like a new guitar pedal,
Oh,
just being honest.
yeah, and I feel like that's how most bands end up on like a bad episode of Behind the Music. Is somebody's not looking at the books, and you're getting burned.
Yes, that's 100% true. Yeah. So yeah, there's actually a story there. Like we've been burned before,
Mm.
and it's not pointing fingers, but basically, we went through a big transition as a band. Our original lead singer, when he um, we had a business manager at the time who said, "Oh, by the way, I know you guys wanted me to make sure everything was good when Matt left, but you owe the IRS like $35,000, by the way. Merry Christmas." And I was like, "Oh." So we fired them, and now I do all the bookkeeping. So yeah, that happens. You're right. It happens.
I love that.
I feel like
I
we
love
all,
that it's behind us. But yeah, so I do a little bit of everything. The books, some of the business. I record all my guitars here at home in my home studio for the stuff that we do as a band, and yeah, all from Ohio. So
Ohio.
right.
is everybody in the band in Ohio? That's what I'm trying to
uh,
find out.
hey, actually no. There's three of us in the band at the moment, and myself, our drummer Mark. We're both still in Ohio. Same area, Northwest Ohio. And our singer, Dustin, he lives down in Tennessee, just outside Nashville, but he's actually from Southeast Michigan. We didn't know him growing up at all, but yeah, so he grew up just over the border here, and now he lives in Tennessee. And a lot of our business is down in Tennessee, so we have a lot of
Mhm.
booking agents and distributor for our label and all that. They're down in Nashville area, but we're in Ohio.
Ohio. I feel like Ohio gets a bad rep. and maybe it's because of Matt. I don't know.
You give it a bad rep.
But no.
I'm doing my best to represent it.
You're doing
I
just fine. Doing just fine.
the first time I drove through Ohio, I was driving to Tennessee. My wife is from the Nashville area, and there were these huge billboards, and they were just calling out. They're like, "Hell is real. It's real big," and I just jokingly was like, "Yeah," and it's called Ohio. Like that's where it is. But no, that is a
You're
lot
from
of.
Michigan, I take it. You must be from Michigan.
No, I'm from Pennsylvania. I've actually,
Oh,
and I mean,
oh.
I met my wife in Ohio, in Columbus. Columbus was a great town. Loved it. So, I mean,
Yeah.
I have nothing bad to say. And Matt, you're great.
Thank you. That's the nicest thing they've ever said to me.
No.
How's that dynamic work with Dustin in Nashville?
That's a great question. It works somehow, you know. Even before Dustin was in the band, we had band members that lived in Tennessee. Um, Back in the day, we had a bass player and a guitar player that lived down there and still do. And it works for us. I think it would be really hard if we were trying to get this thing off the ground from, you know, just building it from the ground up to be in separate towns. With technology now, I guess it wouldn't be impossible, but um, when Dustin did come on board, he was living close by and we were together like all the time, working on songs and trying to figure it all out. But now it's like we get together if we need to rehearse, like before a tour, or before a run. And other than that, we just kind of meet up at the shows, however it works out, wherever we're going.
Yeah. How much did COVID change the dynamic, if at all?
Uh, you know, it changed a lot of things. I mean, this was the first time we had like a serious break since I was 20 years old, and it was kind of marvelous to have that, honestly. So we enjoyed the downtime, and it was a great reset. Um, as far as touring goes and how it affected all that, obviously everything just shut down. And it's still kind of just now getting back to a sense of normal as far as like a tour schedule. But we haven't really kicked back in as hardcore as we used to, which is kind of nice because we all have families and it's hard to be away as much as we used to. But I think right now we're averaging last year and this year, we're probably on pace to do like 45 shows a year, maybe. I think last year might have been 40, which is hardly anything really in the whole scope of things for us, but it worked out. It's been great.
What's like the most amount of shows you've done in a year?
Oh boy, like way back, easily 200. Um, yeah, easily 200. And that probably meant like being on the road for 300 days
Right.
a year. Yeah.
Right. So honestly, I want to jump into you, right? And could you give like a 1 minute version of kind of your story over, you know, the past however many years it's been of the band starting, because you're one of the original members, right? And how it was built. And let's go over the band first. And then after we talk about the band and kind of your journey through that over however many years it's been, I'm interested in knowing exactly kind of when it started and stuff for you. I want to talk about your faith and how that has played into it over the years.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, I grew up in church, and I guess it was junior high when I kind of just made that flip to be like, you know, I want this to be my faith and not just something that I was taught or that my parents have. And I think it was freshman year, coming into freshman year of high school, um, where I don't know what was happening in junior high. I think that's just a time for a lot of people where you start questioning things, and that was it for me. And my parents, I asked them one day if I could go to a Christian high school only because, well, not only, but one of the main reasons was because I knew somebody from my church went to this Christian high school,
Was it a
and
girl?
it wasn't. No, it wasn't. But it was the guy that we ended up starting the band together with. And no, yeah, and it was awesome because my parents said yes, and so I transferred schools freshman year, and it was uh, just very, I mean, it kind of set me on a path, I guess you could say. And it all started with me kind of asking some deeper questions of what my faith really meant to me. Um, just feeling like there was more that I needed to explore in that whole realm. And thankfully, there at that high school, there was plenty of opportunities for me to question my faith, dig deeper into my faith, and to meet people who had um, similar backgrounds in their faith. And it was just a great 4 years of my life. And the band started right in the middle of that. And it started because there's a group of us friends that were trying to play uh, worship for the weekly chapel services. And it was really lame what they had, what was kind of accepted as normal back then. This is like the mid 90s. And we were inspired to kind of just juice it up. So that's how it all started. Playing music together is trying to put together a little worship band for our high school.
That's cool. It's interesting thinking about too, like, so I grew up, I'm like 37 years old in the 90s. I'm a pastor's kid, grew up in the church as well. And
Right.
thinking about like music in our home, like growing up, and I know this is the same for everybody, so I don't want to paint with too broad of a brush, but like we didn't have a lot of like gospel or worship music in my home growing up. Like we had pop music that was Christian. Like so growing up with
Right.
the Newsboys and Carmen and Petra, all the stuff my dad would listen to, sometimes Striper, whatever, which I feel like there is also in one of your first albums. There is is it called like Jesus Goes Metal or Metal Jesus? You did like a 1 minute song at the end of an album.
Jesus metal.
Jesus Metal.
Yeah.
Dude. And I was
Yeah.
just
It was
like,
a hidden
oh,
track. You're
I was
right.
like,
Yep.
where does that come from? Because I was like, in my head, I'm raised like they had to listen to Striper or Petra or something like that. Like, so I'm wondering too, I guess, what were like your influences growing up
Oh yeah.
in that kind of era?
Yeah. I love that you know about that little, it was a hidden track back when like hidden tracks were a thing. So yeah, our drummer, his first concert he ever went to was a Striper concert. His aunt took him to go see Striper when they came through Toledo, I
To
guess,
hell
and
with
he
the
was
devil.
young.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, so he's the one you need to talk to about all that. Because for me, like, growing up, I didn't listen to any Christian music. I didn't know there was such a thing um, until I got into high school and kind of discovered it. One of the first Christian bands I discovered um, was Audio Adrenaline, and then Switchfoot. Switchfoot was the first record, first CD I bought of like a Christian band. Um, and that was right around the time we were starting our band. So it kind of all went together. But the music I grew up on was Tom Petty, um, Jimi Hendrix, uh, lots of classic rock, just guitar, like fun guitar stuff that um, I would get these, tab books and try to learn how to play
Oh
in my
yeah.
basement growing up. And then all the 90s rock that's coming out that era, like Weezer, Foo Fighters, um, all the stuff that was on the radio, like that, alternative rock. So classic rock, alternative rock, and then you introduce like, the Christian rock to that. And I was like, wow, I didn't know you could play music that sounded like Weezer and make Christian music. I had no idea there was like an outlet for that. And that's kind of was our goal when we started the band is like we wanted to be the Christian Weezer or Foo Fighters.
So yeah, I thought that was interesting too. And I was like, were you somebody where you were a guitar player like before you decided to form a band, or were you kind of like wanted to form a band and then was like, I'm gonna learn how to play guitar?
Yeah, I played guitar first. So
Okay.
I think in junior high was when like guitar became like my escape. And that's when I started learning all these classic rock riffs.
Mhm.
Um, so it was a few years after that when we decided to start the band.
Yeah. I also I'm a I would say like a novice. I don't know. That's being self-deprecating. I'm a guitar player as well. But I remember being like 13, 14 years old, and I was definitely the opposite. I was like, I'm want to be in a band because that seems cool. So now it means I need to learn how to play guitar and stuff. Yeah. I don't know if it worked out, but we were like doing the same thing, trying to you know, be Christians that wrote songs that were kind of about God without being about God. I don't know.
Right,
Obviously,
right.
it didn't land super well. We were called Paladin, which my dad gave us that name, and it means Paladin is a knight on a quest. So we were doomed from the very, very beginning of being anything successful. Trying to
That's
write
pretty
songs like
fresh, man. I don't know.
So, okay, let me ask this question. Why, kind of go through that backstory, wanting to go to Christian school, all this kind of stuff. But why did you want to be the Christian version of Weezer or Foo Fighters and not just Weezer or Foo Fighters?
Yeah.
Like, what was it
Wow.
that did that?
I don't know if anybody's ever asked me that question. Um,
Nailed it.
yeah, that's making me think. Because if I had to think back to being 16, it's probably going to sound really just simple and rudimentary, but I think it, to me at that point, like my faith was everything to me, and it just made sense. Um, it wasn't that I didn't, well, I don't want to say it wasn't that I didn't think we could do it in the mainstream. It just wasn't even a question, I guess, which is kind of interesting to look back and think about that because yeah, for so many people who want to do music, even if they're Christian, it's like they're not thinking, "Oh, I want to be in a Christian band." So I think for us, like that's where our heart was when we like starting trying to play worship. Um, it just seemed like that's where we were and that's where we wanted to be and to impact believers, impact the church. We felt like we had something to say, even at 16, to people. But not just like, I mean, you grow and you become a little wiser and your faith grows. So I think at that point, we weren't trying to like speak just to believers, just to Christians. But I'm sure if you actually went back and listened to some of those songs, it probably seemed like it. But I'd like to think that along the way, we kind of learned how to talk to everybody from a faith perspective.
How's that changed then? I mean, it's been 27 years now, and we've talked to pastors who have said that there's almost like an isolation as a pastor because people don't understand the problems that you're going through, and there's almost this pressure of being of being in a pastoral position. And from a music perspective, how does that translate for doing it this long, and does it have that same sort of pressure?
Wow, I I would say yes. I've seen that to be true. I've seen that of people who have been doing this as long as we have. Um, and I think the pressure, it's interesting because I, the pressure when you're doing music is like to be able to make a living at it, people have to actually they have to buy what you're selling, right? So it's always been like this weird thing. It's like a dichotomy of we're making these goods that we're trying to sell. It's based on our faith, but it has to be at a certain level, a certain bar for people to even listen and to buy it, to buy into it. Um, so I think the pressure that we've felt over the years is usually if something's not connecting or not working. Um, but honestly, it's not like we really, our focus isn't like, oh, we have to be on the radio, we have to have successful songs. That's not our focus, though. I can definitely say that. So, um, at this point in our lives, it's like I think we just count it all like a blessing that we even get to do it and we get to like interact with people in general, whether it's a concert or just doing stuff like this. Um, so I try not to feel the pressure, but it's usually if I start to feel the pressure in any way, it's because I'm thinking about the wrong things, I guess.
You've brought up a couple times now this idea of like when you started the desire to kind of lead people into worship or worship atmosphere. And I wouldn't like necessarily describe you guys as like a worship band. I could be wrong with that, but that's not like when I
No, you're
listen to
right.
songs, I wouldn't say
Yeah.
like this is a song that you hear on Sunday morning when you go into church. So like how like when you guys look at that, like that was your heart. Was it like is there a difference between like Christian rock and worship music? What's the relationship between the two? How do you guys kind of approach that? Like, because if you have a goal to write a worship song that's sung on Sundays, I
Yeah.
think you have a very specific kind of thing that you're writing versus, a song that's going to maybe be on the radio or just something that somebody's listening to on Spotify. That's not directly, I don't know what's the difference between worship music and just rock music that is like related to Christianity or faith?
I think that line has blurred a little bit over the years. I mean, when we started, when we signed our first record deal, it was like Chris Tomlin might have been brand new, and he was on the same label. And I remember being at some of the events with him when we were, playing these showcases, and it was like he hadn't hit yet. It wasn't like this whole like worldwide phenomena of like standardized worship. Like
Yeah.
worship at that point when we started was like, I don't even know. I mean, the songs we were playing in high school were old school songs. So a lot's changed since we've been making music. Um, and I think as far as worship is concerned, I, yeah, what we write isn't like worship that like you're gonna you're gonna look up on Song Select and play on a Sunday. I mean,
Right.
it's there. Technically, it's there, but I think that whole space is kind of been, I don't know how you say this, but there's just uh, it's a it's acceptable that like certain artists or groups are worship because of maybe where they came from or whatever, and then there's artists like us who are bands that will never be considered worship,
Right.
and I don't think that's a right, wrong, or good
Right.
or bad. I think it just is what it is.
Well, not every, a lot of churches these days, right? Like the worship bands who are playing on Sundays are coming out with worship albums, right? And that's what
Right.
they're doing. And there's so many like that. I think what's really interesting about you guys too is I listening to your albums kind of over the years, right? It's not like you guys are a completely different band, but as you go through different albums, you definitely have a different vibe, right? You sound a
Yeah.
little bit different, right? Can you talk us through like what that has looked like, even for you on like a musician, like songwriter side of kind of, is it that influences change? Is it that like culture and the times and what's popular changes? Is it how you're going to reach people changes? What's driven those changes over the years?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of everything. I think growing and maturing as a musician is probably the biggest part of it. Um, it's funny because right now we're starting our show with some old school songs and songs we haven't played in forever. And it's like I'm actually was programming some of those sounds into this new pedal I got today, and it's just like dialing up a Marshall stack. It's like that's what I used to play through
Yes.
in that day and age, and it's like you would never do that
Right.
now.
Right.
At least we wouldn't. But it's like I look at some of those bands that were influential when we first started, like Weezer, and like they're still making the same kind of music to a degree. Like they're using the same kind of elements. But yeah, we've changed, and I think a lot of that is because Christian music in general is such a niche. Um, not only is it like not only has my taste in music changed, I guess, over the years, but just what's even acceptable within our genre, I guess you could say, masses. And it just kind of coincides. It's not like we're chasing that. It's just the stuff that I like to listen to is isn't the same as where we started.
All right. So let's knock this out of the park right here, right now. Of like, what are you listening to right now, and what are you listening to right now? Is the first question. Then I have a follow up.
Okay. A lot of Taylor Swift.
Love that. Love that.
um, honestly, that and the U2 record that just got put out that's like all these songs reimagined as acoustic, more chill versions.
Mm-hmm.
Been listening to that some. I'm just digging into the new National album. I I'm not sure where I'm at with it though. I don't want to say yay or nay on it, but and actually a little bit of um, Amy Grant.
Oh
She has a new
man.
single out that's really good, and I want to know who played on it because it sounds like Sheryl Crow did back in the '90s, and I bet you it's the same people. But yeah,
Yeah, and
just
What
pop music, man. I listen to pop music. I mean, not like top 40 pop, but like easygoing stuff.
right? What okay, follow-up question and then we'll move on. Is what is something that people should listen to that they probably aren't listening to right now?
Man, I think something that I'll say this because my son, who's 14, who's starting to really get into like listening to music, um, it's fun showing him stuff for the first time. And there's this band that I love. Obviously, you guys might as well, but the Killers. And it's fun watching because they've been around for about as long as we have. Watching my son's reaction of playing him stuff from like when they first came on the scene to the stuff that they're doing now, and it's cool because he's digging it, and there's just a lot there. Like if you're a band trying to do rock music, like watching their whole career, they've changed quite a bit too, and there's something there for everybody, I think, in their music. So
yeah, that's I feel like one of the coolest things about bands that have been along for kind of the length of time that you guys have, and it goes across genres, but I feel like they all have to kind of continue to reinvent themselves or continue to grow and change with either the decade. Like I think about like Pete Townsend and the Who, and like the stuff like that they did in the 60s and the 70s. Quadrophenia sounds so much different than, I don't know if anybody else is a Who fan, but what they were doing in the 80s. And the same could be said about U2. The same thing could be said about Bon Jovi. The caveat that I was just trying to talk to young Matt about maybe is the Beatles, because they did it all in they evolved so quickly in what they did in
short
such a
amount of
short
time.
amount of time. Um,
Yeah.
but I feel like it's probably few and far between the kind of bands that have been around for 10 plus years that have kind of stayed the same. Like you still know it's them, but like they have
Yeah.
had to kind of change in some way. Um, I just feel like it's just a natural progression of growth and, not being stagnant. And there's always probably going to be fans that wish that you stayed the same way you were in 2008. And it's like we always say, like the deep cuts of like,
Right.
any band is like they were better back then and they got corporate or they got popular. It's like, but like you have to kind of continue to move. And like I think it's a sign of the people that have longevity is like their music and their style like kind of evolves. And I think if you can, not write it off and be like willing and open to change, which we're not open to change a lot, especially with the things that we like. Um,
Right.
so just being open, I'm sorry, uh, to kind of see like where's the artist taking you, and like being willing to kind of go on that journey with them and not like kind of put them in a picture that's from 2010 and saying like you have to still be this person. Like that's an immature way
Yeah.
to approach art.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I would agree with you.
You've been around for a while and you've had different members come in and out. And how do you stay around, keep sort of that identity and keep sort of the same root of things as you evolve?
Culture. Yeah.
Yeah, the same culture.
Yeah. Man, I don't know. I think I've been really blessed that Mark has been in it as long as I have. It's like I think he's always been kind of like um, a sounding board, kind of the heart of the band because of his nature. So I think having that relationship is key. And yeah, we've had people in the band for long seasons of time and then move on. And I think, man, I don't know. I guess we just kind of have this real simple vision of what the band should be, and it's kind of stayed the same because him and I have both been in it now the whole time. And that is just to be kind of real and transparent about our faith and write songs that hopefully um, make a difference for people because they are honest songs. And I think to this day we still try to be that and do that. So it's probably why, partly why maybe we're still here.
I love that. So I have a question that as soon as I found out we were doing this, and drummer Matt, we call him drummer Matt. He's great, right? Uh
He is great.
as soon as I was saying that facetiously, but Chris really meant that. So we give drummer Matt a hard time. We're making him merch though. It's going to be great. Uh But one of the questions that I wanted to ask you is I think it's really interesting of so I am not a musician, but on Sundays I run sound. So I'm the guy on the board behind the scenes, right?
Nice.
Trying my best to make everybody sound good, which they normally do. Um, but one of the things that I've seen over the years in church, because that's been my closest like interaction with musicians and vocalists and all this kind of stuff, is even in church on Sundays and people come, people go, right? But ego always comes into play.
Mm.
And pride can come into play. And I don't think that there's necessarily anything wrong with that, right? But how have you guys dealt with that, right? I feel like to be, a touring band that, plays live shows and you guys have several million streamers on Spotify and all this kind of stuff. I feel like there has to be some kind of ego, some kind of pride there because you're good at what you do, right? But how have you not allowed that to kind of take over or go into a negative light, I guess?
That's a killer question. Oh my gosh. I I don't know. I think it's honestly just by God's grace. I think because I know exactly what you're talking about. I've seen it. We're in churches all the time. We play. I think it goes back to a lot of the way I was raised. I think that's part of it. Because my dad, my mom, my dad owned his own business, and he was self-employed his whole life, and he's a photographer, and a kind of a difficult job to make a living out of if you're especially in a town like what we're in. It's not like a big town, and he made a whole career out of it, a great living being a photographer, and it was a creative job. um, but I think it's all in just that mentality of it's not a given that you're going to get to do what you love day in and day out. And I saw that with my dad. It's like he had to work really hard, and it wasn't something he always loved, but it was something he really was good at. And I think there were seasons of plenty of work and seasons of hardly any work. And I kind of see that against what I've done in my life. It's like there's seasons where songs work and you're kind of playing shows, you're out, you're doing the thing, your streaming numbers are up. And then there's seasons when that's not the case and somebody else is doing those things. And man, I think all I can say is after being through so many of those seasons and then kind of being raised the way I was raised, it's like it doesn't matter if you're in like a season where maybe things aren't clicking. It doesn't change how hard you work or how much you believe in what you're supposed to do. So I think for
Yeah.
me, I can I can still know that like I'm doing the thing. I get to do what I love, and maybe that last song didn't work, but we got 20 other songs that we're excited about. Maybe one of those will like get people excited. But even if it doesn't, it's like I still am able to figure out how to do what I love. And I love coming into these churches where you do experience people who have um, just different ideas of how to make things work musically. And like you said, if you're dealing with different personalities, it doesn't matter if you're in a church setting, if you're any kind of business setting, it doesn't have to be music even, but you're going to
Mm-hmm.
run into personalities of people who have an ego or think they know the better way to do something. It's like you're always going to be um, experiencing people at either their best or their not so best, and it's all about what you bring to that yourself. And I think for me, I've been around enough people to and I know myself well enough that there's been plenty of people who have given me grace in my life when I was the person who thought I knew everything, that now it's like I see a little more clearly that um, I can be that person to other people too. And we could be playing a church for 50 people and even still, and it's like I'm not walking in there thinking, oh, what are we doing wrong? It's like
Right.
we're still here for a purpose. And I don't know, man, I love that. There's seasons, and thankfully it's seasons, because there's seasons where you're just in it and you're just trying to figure things out, and you're gonna maybe wonder what's going on. And there's seasons where like things are clicking, and you're still gonna wonder what's going on, but it's all in how you approach, where your headspace is, and trying not to think too much of yourself. It's a balance.
The word that kept coming into my mind, and you just ended your whole speech with the word balance, and that just kept going through my head, is like, it's all about balance. Because I think that ego gets like that word in itself, like it's painted with a broad brush and says negative, like kill your ego. No way. And it's like, the reality is, as an artist or a creative person in general, or somebody that's putting themselves out there in any way to say like, hey, what I have to say, like I have there's value to it. Like it takes a level of ego that I think can be healthy. Getting on a stage, putting a guitar on, doing whatever, writing something down in a notepad, picking up a paintbrush. Like you have to have the confidence to say, I have something worthwhile. But what I think the pendulum swings and becomes really negative, and it's like your entire self-esteem is based on how people receive you. So I think ego, when it's overused, obviously very unhealthy, can be toxic. Nobody wants to be around a person that is just self-absorbed. But if you don't have that sense of like, man, like God has given me a word or a gift, and I'm going to use that in a positive way, like then could that be like putting your lamp in the bushel basket and like just you just stay in a shell of yourself, and then maybe you like the countless people that probably heard your songs, things that you've written, or whether you on that stage for 50 people at a church, like, man, like that music is a powerful thing. One, I was just listening to a podcast and Jackie Hill Perry was talking about like the power of like the sound, and it's like tonality and how that moves people in a different way than just written word. And maybe it's because I'm a musician that I gravitate toward that more, but there is like, I don't know, if you can do it well and put something out there, that like music has the power to touch people in a way that I don't know that any other medium really does. Um, And so like, if you don't have the courage or the belief that you are doing something of value, like how many people would miss out on that? How many lives would be changed? In a
Right.
season of like real depression, sometimes it's song that brings me out of it and like gets me centered back, whether it's faith-based or not. More often than not, it is faith-based. So I don't know. I think that it's like,
Yeah.
we so quickly put ego into this, like, oh, don't have an ego, you're like bad. It's like, no, it's don't overuse the ego. Don't think that the ego is like, if your perspective is warped to the point where it's like, it's all me, it's like, well, then you have a problem. But what I heard is just balancing it and keeping
Yeah.
perspective. And like, that's
Yeah.
really cool.
I think it's important to know where your value comes from. And I
Mm.
think for me, it's like it's what we try to tell people at our shows. It's like it's not about being on a stage. It's not about being in a band. It's like everybody has God-given value, and because of that, we can do what we're called to do. And yeah, I don't think. I think if you're going to try to shoehorn your will onto anything, it's not the place where I want to be. And
Right.
I think just knowing that we can have a song that maybe I love and it doesn't connect, it doesn't matter, because my value isn't any less
Yeah.
um, in the eyes of the Father. It's like it's just that's kind of where you have, especially if you're gonna do something like what we do and call it Christian music. It's like I guess we're kind of setting ourselves up um, to, if we're really going to hope that we're reaching people with like the hope of Christ, it's like it can't be about what what our agenda is selfishly as a band who wants a number one single or anything like that.
Right.
So, and for some people, I think it's okay to have a balance of being motivated to do what you feel like you're called to do. Like we wouldn't be here if we didn't work hard, or if we didn't believe that things were possible. But I think it all comes back to we believe it's possible because of who we are in Christ, and it's it's proven to. I guess at this point, I'm 42, that like something's worked for the past 20 plus years. Thanks for telling everybody it's been 27 years, by the way, Matt. I don't like to do the
Matt.
math on that, but yeah, it has. So, anyways, we love telling people that their value is given to them by our Creator, and I hope, if anything, when this whole thing is over as a band, that whether it's people that get to hear us in other parts of the world, or if it's my own kids that
Yeah.
hear any of our music and may or may not think it's cool. I hope they at least hear that. And so
Here's what's cool is that before we got on to record with you, before you got on, I was talking to Matt and Corey about how I wanted to ask this question about ego, right? And I was trying to explain kind of what I meant. And then I was like, but wait, what if Chris is one of the people who I consider to have like a really negative ego and thinks they're better than everybody else? Because I'd never talked to you before, right? But your answer,
Yeah, so good.
like, proved that that's not the case. And I really respect that answer. And I think one of the things that I'm most curious about is, you even talked about how sometimes you thought you knew the right answer to everything. And right. And several times throughout this, you've talked about how your faith has matured. And as a musician, you've matured, right?
right.
Can you talk about what does that mean? How have you personally kind of changed over the years?
27 years. 27
I wasn't
years.
gonna say it again, but
No, I love that question too, because it comes back to the word that I've used earlier. It's grace, and yeah, because when we were 20 something having a go at this, you're just you're just in a different headspace. And I think after so many times of maybe butting heads with the other guys, or enough times of realizing like you're not the hottest thing out there. It's like there's gonna be a reality check time and time again. And I think I'm just grateful that I can sit here on this side of it and know there's still plenty more to learn, but at least have a recognition of um, there is grace. There's God's grace is sufficient for all of my failures and all the ways that I've mistreated people or have thought of myself higher than other people over the years,
Yeah,
and and into the future. So
it's good.
it's like the more that we look to try to be like Jesus, it's the more that we can have that kind of grace for others. And I, yeah, I fall back on that all the time. It's all about grace, no matter what.
so I just want to point out for anybody who's listening to this or anybody who's watching, I think Corey has like a question or follow up, and I want to turn it over to him. But there's this thing of where I feel like it's very easy to listen to the words that Chris is saying right now and like make an assumption that he's not being genuine. It's very easy to do that, right? But what I want to say is like, okay, to be fair, I've never met the guy in real life, right? But
Right.
sitting here watching his expressions, sitting here watching and hearing the passion in his voice, like I just want anybody out there who's like not watching this or just listening to audio version or whatever it is, like you look and sound and feel like you're being incredibly genuine right now. And this isn't just like Chris putting on a show for the podcast or for anything else. And I wanted to just call that out because I'm really enjoying this. I think you're awesome, dude.
Oh, that's awesome. I appreciate that, Taylor.
Yeah,
That means a lot.
I don't even know. It's like we say words even like genuine and grace, but it's like I think the level of care is like very evident. Like you care about how you've grown, about the process, about like what you're doing, and Yeah, there's also like just a crazy amount of humility I feel like that you have too, just in your tone for to have done some of the things that you've done. Like I mean, I was the guy, to be totally honest, everybody bashes on K-Love, but like I had a car for a long time that would not didn't couldn't connect to Bluetooth, didn't even have like the jack to like plug in, or it did have an 1/8-inch jack, but like it didn't work. It's a
uh,
2009 Malibu. God bless her. But like, so I would literally like driving to work in the shady side, I'd be listening to Caleb because like I would like want, like, I'm trying to like build myself up in some way, like before I go into this cubicle or whatever I was doing, So it's like, I feel like that. And
oh,
when you do that, people like are like, that's real life. Like there are a lot of Americans that are doing that, tuning in. And like now it's like you can just my Bluetooth just automatically connects to my phone. But like there was a portion of my life where that wasn't a thing. And like Christian pop, Christian radio, like that was a thing that like would help me kind of just be centered for the day. And like really what I was going to that for was just to try to be the most positive like that I could be. And like to make sure that the spirit I walked into my work environment, whatever that is, was in a place that was hopefully like aligned with God and with grace and with love and care.
right.
And be real honest, like you were a part of that, like, which is crazy. And like
Oh,
that that your music kind of reaches so many people that way. And then you still talk about to hear in your tone, just like how you've learned and how you like stay humble and like carry grace into your interactions. I think that perspective, a lot of people like look at artists that have success or musicians, and I think can very easily be like judgy and kind of assume the worst. And like they're actually kind of
mm.
assholes, like whatever. And like you're not that guy, which is cool. You're not that guy. So I don't know. That's what strikes me the most out of this conversation. I don't know. Hopefully you get something out of that.
Well, if you ever have Dustin or Mark on, make sure, might want to fact check all that, run it by them, make sure I'm not that guy. But
Yeah, it's great.
I try. And I love that you even would say, I don't want to say admit, but yeah, listening to K-Love for, to be uplifted. It's like nothing wrong with that. And I love that there's artists um, that put music out that really encourages me. Um, and I can look at it and appreciate it and not feel like in competition with it. Because at this
Yes.
point in my life, it's like I'm hopefully past that, where it's like if a song hits me in a special way, then I'm all about it too.
I
Yeah.
love
How's
that. Go ahead,
Go
Matt.
ahead, Matt. You got something to say?
how's your taste in music changed as you've grown as a musician and as an adult? Like, what are you looking for in music now that's different from when you were younger?
More space, just way more space. It's like, and that can be melodically, that could be lyrically, everything. I think it just kind of comes with the age. It's like before, it's like you had to get so much in, you had to do all the things all at the same time. And now it's just letting music breathe and talk to me in different ways. So,
I love that.
that's that's a big part of it. There's when I want like rock music, like a lot of stuff I go back to, not even back to, but like it's those artists that are still making music that have grown as well, like the Killers.
Yeah.
Like listening to that now still gets me going as much as like their stuff before that was probably just a little more intense. Now it's like there's a little more restraint. Like they know how to use the tools that they've kind of honed in over the years. And yeah, I love space in music. I love when I get to record, finding ways to tastefully fill the space. And more often than not, it's like once you're done laying down a bunch of tracks, it's then a matter of like, okay, stripping away stuff and seeing if you really
Yes.
need it or not.
Great. Chris, I have a question for you, okay? And this is going somewhere, I promise. But, Matt, so drummer Matt, for anyone who didn't know, he played some shows with Sanctus Real, right?
Oh yeah.
All right. So, Chris, from your professional opinion, I think you're honestly one of the most qualified people in the world to rate drummer Matt's drumming abilities, what would you give him on a scale of 1 to 10?
1 to 10. I don't know if there is a scale that could actually translate the fact that I believe Matt could play with anybody,
Yes, I agree
uh,
with that.
anywhere,
Yes.
and it doesn't matter where those people are at. Yeah, Matt has the thing for sure. If that makes him a 10, then I guess that's a 10.
I love
But
that so
he's got
much.
it.
So
It's the truth.
what's crazy is that you said one of the things you're looking for is space, right? And we have had conversations about how I love mixing. I love doing sound at church when Matt plays, because Matt builds, bridges, whatever it is he's building, but the bigger he gets, the more space he actually allows into his fills and things, and they just accentuate every hit that he plays, and I love
we also
it.
have to acknowledge that now every worship song is a 9-minute build, so there's a lot of building. There's a lot of building that's happening.
It's a talent, and I
Right.
know, like, we got to play with Matt a few shows, and to step in and try to play something to what guys are used to hearing that might be daunting to somebody, but Matt never blinked. He just did it. And that's when you're at that level of, like, people in our industry, if they're having somebody hired come in and play or fill in for somebody or do anything, like, that is the expectation. I couldn't do it. I'm
Mm.
not that kind of player, like, on a guitar level. Um, that's why I'm really glad I'm in a band and we get to make our
Yes.
own music. So, but, like, there's people that just, they hear music, they understand the roadmap. Um, yeah, Matt did that really well with us. And when you're playing worship, I mean, that's a huge thing. Like, you have to feel that sense of worship and know where it's going. And
Right.
it's really key to have somebody who's not just playing at 100.
Right.
Like, it just doesn't work.
So first off, shameless plug that there is drummer Matt merch out when this episode comes out. So if you want to get some drummer Matt some shirts or a hat, Chris Rohman of Sanctus Real has verified him as a 10 out of 10 drummer. So keep that in mind. No, but
He's an 11.
one of the
Matt should go to 11.
All
He goes
right,
to
we'll give
11.
it to him.
There you go.
So one of the questions that I had for you, kind of a follow-up question to the ego question, right? Because now you've been boosting Matt's ego, making his head a little bit bigger, right? So let's just get back on that train of, okay, so here, interesting fact of the day, if you didn't know this, right? Sanctus Real has been nominated for 2 Grammys, right?
True.
That's
Yes.
correct?
Yeah, yeah.
And that's like not a small feat. Like
That's
kind of a
crazy.
big deal. Like it's kind of a big deal. And one of the things that I want to ask you is, as we talk about ego and you talk about kind of maturing through, being a musician, and you're a father, right? You're like all of these different things. How are you not in a position as a musician, as a songwriter, to not just chase that now? Like you said, you weren't chasing it, right? You're not chasing something. You're putting out music.
Yeah.
You're putting out music that you love. How do you not? Like, you're nominated for something at the absolute highest level in the musical realm, right? How are you
Yeah.
not just year after year, we're chasing
Yeah.
that? We're chasing a nomination. We're chasing a win. We're chasing this because
Yeah.
we've had a taste of it, but we didn't
Yeah.
actually get the win, right?
So that's a killer question, because I'll tell you exactly why, and what I've learned over the years, in a few different ways, not just when it comes to the Grammys, but even when it comes to, like, a desire to be on a record label. But when it comes to the Grammys, it's like, you realize maybe the first time it happened, we thought, yeah, we're great. Like, of course, like, how old was I? The first time I wasn't even 30 yet. But then you get wiser because you learn how things work. And you realize you were only nominated for a Grammy because you were on the biggest Christian record label, and everybody at that record label voted for you.
Oh, wow.
Mercy Me's
Wow.
Mercy Me's never
Yeah.
been nominated for a Grammy. They're one of the biggest bands because they're on a really small indie label.
Wow.
And it's just, that's the nuts and bolts of it. So the same thing with being on a record label. Like when Dustin joined the band, we thought we needed number one song. I don't know if thought that, but we thought we needed a record label. So much so that when we finally um, got a song at radio all on our own without a record label that had all this success without a label, we still thought we needed a label. So we signed up with a label um, in the middle of all that, only to discover that it wasn't the right thing and we didn't need a label. Um, but all along, we thought like that's the thing, that's the ticket, that's the way you're going to make it. And maybe some of that was because we thought um, we wanted we want to be back in that game like everybody else is in the game at a certain level. But so it goes back to just the idea of like I'm, we're constantly growing and constantly realizing um, this business of music and that it is a business. And before my 20s, it was like things just seemed like you're more in awe of things, like things just kind of had this, and music for me in general still has that. Like, and that's why I think I can keep going without feeling
Yeah.
the need for Grammys or feeling the need for a label, is
Yeah.
because the music itself is what gets me excited. And writing a song that is going to impact people on a heart level, whether it's millions of people or not, is what still gets me going. So yeah, a lot of time has passed and a lot of things have been learned, and you just realize like, um, yeah, I'd say it, but it doesn't even matter. It's not like we're looking to for people to approve of what we're doing or think that we're special because we have Grammy nominations or any of this stuff. Um, because at the end of the day, it's just not what it's about. But
Man, that's crazy. And that's amazing to take a question like that is like recognizing you at the highest level of the music industry and then to have a perspective and looking back. And I'm sure hindsight is always like easier being like, well, let's actually talk about why and what does that mean? And like what are all the pieces behind it that are like going into that,
right,
and
right,
then saying being able to stay level from that. And then I was just thinking about, man, like you talked about earlier, you could say I write a song that I love, and then you send it to the label or something. Like they're like, it doesn't really land, doesn't go. It's like, but if that's a song that you wrote and then impacted your children, impacts your wife, and then I was just thinking about David,
right.
and man, before he was king, before he was doing it, like he is watching his father's sheep, and he's going through it, and the talk, and he is writing songs that I assume because that's just the abundance of his heart. And because if God has something he puts on your heart that goes into
Right.
a song form that's just for your family, like maybe that's just what it is, and like that doesn't make it any less valuable than it is a song that you put out and reaches millions of
Yeah.
people. And sure, that's amazing that those people get touched by it, but it doesn't make the song that you wrote for your family any less valuable, or the song we write for ourselves. Um,
I
like
love that.
so, I just think that perspective, man,
Yeah.
Chris, that was to be able to see that, and then like I'm blown away by that, dude. I'm really like just
Yeah.
it's
Well,
amazing. And
like I said, I well, we've grown over the years, and it's you have perspective after realizing that's how things work. But I think now at this point in my life, I'm grateful that I'm in a position where maybe I can help other people see things at face value too. So
yeah,
yeah,
and then find the real value in it. Like see the game for what it is and say like
yeah,
what does it mean to you? Because that's the thing you're going to take into your life when you're in
totally.
your 40s and 50s and 60s, and the legacy you're going to leave. Um, so good.
So Chris, I'm gonna ask the question, right? Um, what? First off, let's ask the question. Okay, this is a two-part question. Okay, first off, what is going on with Sanctus Real right now? I know you guys doing a little tour. You guys are playing some shows, right?
Yeah.
And everybody can go check that out. sanctusreal.com, by the way. I'll plug you, dude. I don't care. The follow-up though, and I didn't really let you answer the first one, but the real question is what's next for Sanctus Real? You guys working on an album? You guys working on a big tour? Like what is coming up next for you guys?
Yeah, man. We're excited because we have a brand new song coming out. Um, just one song. It's coming out June 2nd. and it's called Dare to Hope. And we are so excited about this song because I really think it's going to impact a lot of people. And yeah, that's what's next. So we're going to be shooting a music video actually in a few weeks. I'm excited for that because I'm actually not doing it this time. So I've done most of ours, and I get a little break, and I'm excited to see what a guy that I really respect brings to the table on it. But the song itself is what I'm really excited about. We have easily like um, a dozen songs that are in a state where they could be recorded for real or put a real vocal on and be songs. Um, but this one I think is special. So we actually pulled the plug on another song that was already ingested into the distribution system right at the last minute in substitution for this song. And I think one of the reasons why I think it's so special is because we wrote it with a good friend of ours, two good friends of ours, but specifically the one who's the producer on it. His name's David Spencer. Um, there was a tragic school shooting in Nashville a month and a half, almost 2 months ago.
Yeah.
And when that happened, I was actually on spring break in Florida, and I left my phone in our hotel room and was down at the pool with my kids, and came back up. And I hardly ever like unplug, but like I unplugged, came back up to these texts about this shit that happened, and the fact that two people we're very close with, their kids were at the school and go to that school, and we were just waiting the rest of the afternoon to hear like if they were okay. Um, just tragic. And David's kids were there. His wife works there.
Wow.
Um, this woman who's on our radio team who helps get our songs on the radio, her kids go to school there. So it was all their kids were okay, but just a horrific thing to have be a reality to people who are very close to you.
Yeah.
Wow.
And we had this rite scheduled before all that happened, because it's kind of hard to get everybody's schedules to line up. But so I think it was like 3 weeks after that is when this rite was supposed to happen with David and another writer. His name's Ethan Hulse, and Dustin and I. And it was David's first rite back after all this happened, and he was still just extremely shooken up from it. And we didn't know if we were going to write a song that day, or that wasn't even like something I expected to happen, or I didn't have an expectation of walking in to like hang out with one of my good friends of like, well, we need to get a song out of this. Like that wasn't at all. It was
Right.
just like, how can we be here for him?
Yeah.
How can we love on him? How can we support him? And it was an amazing just time to be together with somebody and to feel like you can be kind of just God's hands and feet to him in that moment, because he was just reeling. But out of that, some very honest conversation happened, and I believe God kind of just put this song in the room, and that's the song that after we wrote it, we didn't even know what had happened. We didn't know. Yeah, he sent us the demo a few days later, and we were all like, we don't even remember this happening.
Wow.
And so we finished it real quickly, and the other song was already in process, already mixed, going to master, and we pulled the plug on the one, and we just feel like this is a song of hope that the world desperately needs right now, and not just because of these things that happen, like these school shootings and these senseless things, but everybody's looking for hope.
Yeah.
And I think it's just, where do we know to look for hope?
Yeah.
And that's where we're
Awesome.
at. That's what's most important to us, is sharing that with people.
So I'm sorry, just to make sure that I'm right. The song is called "Dare to Hope," right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what's super sick about this is you said it's coming out on June 2nd, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so anybody who's listening to this, we were planning on this episode coming out at the end of May, beginning of June anyway. So I think we should just release it on June 2nd and call this episode Dare to Hope. And let's push some listeners, let's push some traffic over to Sanctus Real and this new single that they're coming out with, because just that story behind it and to hear the heart behind it. And honestly, through this whole, conversation that we've had, that's definitely winding down, is this your heart and your calling behind this, and how much you have a passion for what you do. And it's so cool to see that. And honestly, it's like, it's really inspiring, like, to have a musician like you, who you tour, you have all this stuff, all of this everything, and you're out here and you're being a real person who is thankful for God's grace, right? And you're trying to live like Jesus, and you're putting out this song, Dare to Hope. And so I just I thank you for your time, man. Everybody go listen Dare to Hope. If you've listened, we're about an hour and 10 minutes in, or whatever it is. Go listen to the song. But honestly, thank you, Chris. Thank you for your time, man.
Thank you. That means so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you a lot, Chris. Thanks for
Jumping
kind words.
in.
It wasn't a good time for me to jump in, but thank you, for everything you said. And this was really cool. It's great to have you on and have this conversation with you.
Oh, man. Dare to Hope, June 2nd.